For Bruce and Scott Foster, seldom rest is a way of life. That's the name of their farm in southwest Michigan. This is a fifth-generation family business in an area where a small rainstorm often turns into a deluge with little warning.
This is what we call a diversion. As you look through here, you see some nicely banked sides. It allows the water to run off somewhat at a slower pace. We've got it all nicely sided also, just to slow down the flow of water as it's going down through here. We've got the right amount of slope, the right amount of banking to hold what they call a 20-year rain. That's the rain you get every 20 years. That's a real gully washer.
To further control runoff and erosion, the Fosters cut back on plowing and tilling. This also reduces air pollution.
This year, 80% of our soybean acres are no-till. We think that helps to conserve soil moisture and allows us to keep more of the residue on top of the soil to help with runoff. We'd like to think of having water walk off, letting it do it that way instead of having it run off.
Soil testing, liming, and the addition of a low-pressure irrigation system are just a few of the ways Bruce and Scott Foster are improving the environment. And already, another generation is waiting in the wings.
We are spending time with people that are really concerned about the environment. They'll see that the farmers and the cattle people, they take good care of what they have because that's the only way they can pass it on to their children in the next generation or to someone else that wants to be involved with livestock.
When Clay Grubin arrived in the Ozark Mountains in the 1950s, he found pastures filled with brush and weeds and streams that carried more sediment than water.
My ancestors didn't have access to the technology and the training that we have nowadays and didn't have soil and water conservation help with all the technical advice that we have and didn't have the proper equipment to do it with that we have. We have more technology, more knowledge, and better equipment to fight erosion and help the environment than what our ancestors did. And hopefully that the next generation will have better technology than we have.
Clay's soil conservation efforts include improved livestock watering systems and rotational grazing. He controls overgrazing by matching the number of cattle to a field's production capabilities and to the time of year. Over the years, Clay Grubin has developed very specific goals to produce high-quality beef and maximize profits without damaging or depleting the natural resources, soil, or water. He consistently achieves his goals, and his efforts have not gone unnoticed.
Clay is a leader in the area here as far as approaching these erosion problems. His farm is typical of a lot of the farms. They're old crop farms that crops didn't work, and the price we paid for not working was the loss of our topsoil. And he's been a leader in identifying these problems and taking action on them.
Bud Purdy's grandfather started ranching in Idaho's Peekaboo Valley in 1882. Bud got his first job on the ranch in 1927, hauling manure for 10 cents a load. 30 years later, Bud bought the ranch when he met Ruth.
Bud and I were married 42 years ago, and that's when I came to the ranch. Incidentally, it was my first time on a ranch. I had never, I've been raised in the city and not out in the country like this, but I've loved it ever since I came here.
Today, Bud Purdy is 76 years old, and Ruth is 81. Along with their son Nick, you'll still find them working every day on their Peekaboo Valley Ranch, and environmental stewardship is one of their top priorities. In order to rotate cattle over as much of the land as possible, they installed more than 100 miles of fencing and 20 miles of pipeline. Bud Purdy has seen the benefits firsthand.
Well, I think grazing is beneficial to the range and wildlife because it does keep the fire danger less. It keeps the grass eaten down, and we have a lot more wildlife on our ranch here than the Conservancy has on theirs right above me, because they don't graze it, and it's just a jungle up there.
And then there's the story of the beaver. When they had problems with flooding, the Purdy's turned to Mother Nature's dam builders for help.
In 1985, after trying everything else, I got the idea of putting some dams in, using some irrigation pipe that was surplus and wire and plastic, but putting them in so that one dam dropped into the other one to kill the velocity of the water. And in conjunction with that, I had the idea of maybe putting some beaver up here, because I figured they were really the real dam builders and do a better job than we would.
In about 30 days, the first 3 beaver built 4 dams. Now you'll find 150 beaver dams in the canyon. The dams have slowed the spring floods, the stream banks have stabilized, and the water table is rising. It's just one more way the Purdy's have become partners with nature.
When I first came here, they were not into environmental stuff, as you call it now. But I soon found out that Bud ran the ranch so it would last another 100 years. It's 110 years old now. We were doing this environmental thing, but we didn't call it that.
Harry Kenobi started his cattle feed yards in northeast Nebraska 30 years ago, and protecting the environment was a priority from the very beginning. Oversized lagoons were built to contain cattle manure from the feedlots, and they've worked well. Since the feedlot started, tests for nitrate and bacteria have been conducted annually, and there has never been any sign of groundwater contamination. After being collected in the lagoons, manure is transported from the feedlots to the fields, providing nutrients for corn and alfalfa.
By taking it out of the feedlot, your cattle have better surroundings. Tender loving care goes a long ways in profit of cattle, so they got to be comfortable where they lay, and they got to be on dry dirt. That's important, so getting rid of that waste out of the yard is very important, and your farmland helps you do that.
Today, the Kenobi family business has expanded to include farming and feeder cattle procurement. But the business is still based on Harry's environmental philosophy that manure is a valuable, renewable, natural resource. And to show what being a good neighbor is really all about, just as soon as the manure has been hauled from the feedlots to the fields, you'll find a water truck on the highway washing away the manure tracks.
Some things are just the right thing to do. And by doing the right things, people will respect you for what you're doing. And then at the same time, you realize that there's some profit out of it, because, like for instance, by removing that waste from the feedlot, you have a better cost of gain on your cattle for your operation.
The Carrizo Valley in New Mexico, 7,500 feet above sea level. The environment is more common to Africa than the United States. Just about everything here is unique, including the person who watches over the land.
I lived in Kenya for 2.5 years, working with the Kenya Ministry of Agriculture. And I was very fortunate in that I saw a country a lot like New Mexico. I was able to watch and figure out what drove the savanna ecosystems in Africa. And I realized that fire was a very important part of that particular kind of ecosystem. So when I returned in 1969, I began to use fire here.
Sid Goodlow believes the use of fire has paid off in every way. The range condition has improved, calf weights have gone up, and wildlife habitat has improved.
The benefits of fire are that the population of invading plants is kept down, the nutrients are recycled into the soil, insects of all kinds are controlled. I think fire is something that has a great future in this country now that people are beginning to understand it.
While in Kenya, Sid also learned about short rotational grazing, moving the cattle as often as every 5 days. He has reestablished a network of riparian areas, and cattle and wildlife are prospering.
This is the kind of a composition of vegetation that the wildlife prefers, where they can come out from the edge, graze out in the open where the plants are more nutritious and more palatable, and if there's some danger, they go back into the thicker trees and are able to protect themselves.
The Spade Ranch is rich in history. It was established in 1889 by Isaac Elwood, half owner of the patent for barbed wire. Elwood's great-grandson hired Dub Waldrop to run the ranches in 1967. Today, the Spade has several ranches located in Texas and New Mexico, and nearly all of the land is native range. To help hold the soil in place and discourage weeds, Dub has planted a variety of cover crops and deep-rooted grasses. And to prepare for those inevitable dry spells, Dub and his crew have added nearly 300 stock ponds, 57 windmills, and miles of pipeline.
20 years ago, during an extended drought, we would have had to move the cattle and then probably wait a year or two before we could come back. The last drought, which was about as bad as we've had, we were fully as productive 3 months after the first rain as we'd been before the drought set in. So I think it's a case of being sure your grasses are strong, deep-rooted when the drought strikes, and then it doesn't take them nearly as long to recover.
The environmental improvements have meant increased productivity on all of the Spade ranches. The original Spade Ranch land in Texas now produces twice as much beef as it did just 20 years ago. And Dub Waldrop knows he is investing in the future.
You know, it's important that we take care of this country because we're only here for a short time, and really, I suspect if we're in charge of it, then morally we're obligated to keep it in at least as good a condition as we found it, and really we should try to make it better, especially if we're going to keep these properties in the same families over several generations.
The Wall family has ranched in Florida for 44 years, always with a commitment to the environment. Over half of the acreage at the Rafter T Ranch is kept in native forages. Instead of planting citrus groves, Jimmy Wall decided to provide a natural habitat for deer and other wildlife.
I think everybody enjoys seeing wildlife, whether it be a game species or others. Everybody enjoys nature. And friends of mine who have an urban background go out there, and whether they see a bald eagle or a caracara or a fox squirrel, deer, turkey, hogs, I mean, they all get a kick out of it. And as a result of that, I enjoy taking people around the ranch.
That pride is shared by everyone in the Wall family. Jimmy's wife, Jerry, and their daughter, Casey, actively participate in managing the ranch. Together, they've worked to improve the watershed, expand rotational grazing, and establish legumes and natural grasses. They've also found an unexpected benefit. It brings them closer together.
I think it creates a supportiveness between the members of the family. I think it creates more of a closeness. We're all sharing a common bond, and we're all sharing a common a love that we can pass on to other generations.
I feel very fortunate to have parents that are aware, that are thinking about their kids and, not just doing whatever they want to the land. I feel like it's something that they have installed in us, in myself and my brothers.